On day 500 of the war in Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Snake Island, where Ukrainian soldiers famously defied a Russian warship at the beginning of the invasion. He also thanked the United States after Washington agreed to supply cluster bombs to Ukraine. It's a weapon that has been banned by more than 100 countries around the world. Despite this, Ukraine has been pressing for the artillery shells, which drop multiple explosives to help with their counter-offensive against Russian forces. Russia has been using the weapons since the start of the war. Human rights groups say cluster bombs kill indiscriminately and unexploded devices can pose a danger to civilians for many years. Our security correspondent Gordon Carrera has this update from Kyiv.
It is contentious because human rights groups and others have long viewed them as dangerous to civilians, and more than 120 countries have banned them. But they have been used already in this conflict, and Ukraine has been pushing for them. It's become clear, really, that Ukraine has been pushing for them for months, and that this issue has been on President Biden's desk in Washington for a decision on whether or not to provide them. And I think a few things have made the difference. One is that Ukraine is running short of regular ammunition and artillery rounds and needs more ammunition. And one option is the stocks of cluster bombs which the US already had. There's also the fact that the Ukrainian counter-offensive certainly has gone slower than some would have liked, and military strategists believe they offer the possibility of penetrating some of those Russian defences, of targeting Russian artillery and Russian infantry. So they believe there's a military value, and that clearly has been enough to overcome Washington's initial concerns. And Ukraine has provided written assurances, things like that it will only use them in certain areas and will invest in a clean-up to make sure that the risk to civilians is minimised. But it's no doubt there will still be controversy around this, and some caution amongst other NATO allies about the provision of cluster munitions.
Well, staying with this story, I've been speaking to Sir Richard Shearer, former NATO Deputy Supreme Commander Europe, for his thoughts on the latest developments in the war.
I think the first point I'd make is that to those allies, NATO allies, who are complaining or criticising President Biden's timely decision to give these munitions to Ukraine, Ukraine has been crying out for ammunition for months. And if what Ukraine had wanted and Ukraine needed had been given right from the start, instead of the incremental drip, drip, drip approach that has characterized so much of the provision of capability, Ukraine might not be in the same position. So they should look to themselves and the extent to which they have supported Ukraine. Second point I'd make is to ask three questions. Number one, does this make it more difficult for Russia? Number two, does it make it easier for Ukraine in this most difficult of military operations, launching a counteroffensive, breaking through difficult minefields, well-sited minefields, defensive positions, tank obstacles and the like? And number three, is it going to make Ukraine's counteroffensive more successful? If the answer to all three is yes, which it is, well, good for President Biden.
Can I put to you, sir, this statement we've had from the UK Defence Intelligence Committee this morning, an update this morning, which states that Ukrainian forces have made steady gains in the north and south of Bakhmut. And I wonder if Ukraine is making slow but steady progress, whether this is a suggestion that the counteroffensive is working and that we don't need to, the country doesn't need to opt for cluster bombs, which of course will impact their own civilians.
I think it is making steady progress, but as I said earlier, it is about the most difficult of operations of war, this, to launch a major offensive, penetrating, breaking through well-sited Russian defended positions, obstacle belts, minefields, killing areas, and the like. And therefore they need everything they can. They need everything they could get at their disposal, concentrate force, and that means including cluster munitions. Now, of course, in an ideal world, they wouldn't have wanted to use them. But this is not an ideal world. Russia has liberally sprayed mines all over Ukraine. Now, there hasn't been much from Amnesty International about that, frankly. At the current rate of progress, the mines that Russia has laid and sprayed over Ukraine is going to take 750 years to clear with current assets. This is Ukrainian territory, and if the Ukrainians want cluster munitions, they should get them.
And where does this leave the alliance? We said in my introduction there that this type of ammunition is banned in over 100 countries. We have an alliance which is crucial to the success of Ukraine's strategy here. Does this compromise its unity?
No, it should not do. What it should do is make the alliance members, particularly those reluctant or to give capability to Ukraine or have not given the capability to Ukraine, like Hungary, for example, it should make them realize that the only way Ukraine is going to achieve the victory that they need and they must have is if the alliance gets behind Ukraine 100%. And gives them what they want. So we're still, for example, not only have they been calling for munitions, they've been calling for air support, air cover, F-16s. And to make it, to launch an offensive without air superiority makes it even more difficult. So this places even more of a premium on the alliance coming together in a very strong way at Vilnius. And the next few days is absolutely critical to the perception of NATO as a strong alliance, which matters as far as Russia is concerned.